just to kind of kick things off, I'd like to just kind of start by hearing the story of how you guys got started. You know, how Perception was kind of founded, and what specifically was the opportunity that you guys saw in the marketplace to launch this company?
So this is Jeremy. Basically, the two of us met and worked for many years at a company called RGA, also known as R. Greenberg Associates, in the mid to late 90s, doing a lot of commercial work, animation, special effects, and so forth. They changed their business model in late 2000. They went completely .com and transformed into a digital agency, and basically gave us the option to stay aboard doing websites or take the exit door, and good luck with our careers. So I took the exit door. I started doing some freelance work. Danny stayed at RGA for a few more months doing some interactive work, but he was as bored as I was doing freelance work, and I convinced him to start Perception with me. I had this idea that we could accomplish everything that we were doing at RGA for a much more cost-effective model using desktop machines, and basically software had advanced to the point where you didn't need high-end equipment that we were both using at RGA, like Flames and Avids, and instead with a couple of Mac computers and After Effects and Final Cut, we could do everything we used to do for a fraction of the cost in a much more streamlined way, and
Sure.
It wouldn't take much startup capital to get something off the ground. So that sort of was the impetus. At the time, it was kind of things were definitely transitioning into this motion graphics world, which today is pretty commonplace. But back then, still agencies were used to going into $1,000 an hour suites at big studios to do flame work and edit suites and so forth. So we were coming from that world, and we were transitioning into a desktop world.
You guys just kind of jumped into it, or did you have client relationships already developed, and you knew who your first customers were going to be, or?
Pretty much jumped into it. I mean, we signed our lease and painted the walls in a small office studio before 9/11 happened. So, after that, everything kind of just shut down, obviously. We basically just kept moving forward and tried to. We had a great reel because a lot of the work we worked on at RGA was top notch. So we were able to attract clients, but it was up to us to go to the pitches, win the pitches, and deliver the work that was second to none.
But to just piggyback on what Danny just said, yes, the technology allowed us to do that. Very low cost. We basically only had to invest in a couple of Macs and software, and as Danny said, rent out a small space. We were able to find a company that would basically rented us an office within their loft to set up shop at.
Oh, wow.
And then it was just about cold calling and knocking on a lot of doors. And in those days, everything was still on tape, so we were making reels by the dozens and messaging them and FedExing them all around town and all around the country, trying to get people's attention. There was no real web presence yet for us, as today, is so we take for granted. Back then, it wasn't like that at all.
Okay. And just for context, so what is kind of both of your individual backgrounds? Did you study design in school, or is this kind of self-taught, or how did you guys kind of get into the business in the first place?
Go ahead, Danny. You go first.
I'll go first since I'm the older one. I actually went to St. John's University for business because I thought I was going to take over my father's restaurant, and then luckily enough, my last year of college, I had to take an extra, couple credits to graduate, and I took a visual effects course in Manhattan. And then that kind of got my brain going as far as, in the creative world and loving visual effects. So I told my father to basically take the restaurant and shove it. And I went on to work at RGA. And then from there, I got a position in the, digital department, and then started cutting mats, doing work with, on commercials, things like that as assistant, and then a couple people left to work at ILM and other places in LA, and I got bumped up very quickly, and I was a lead flame Inferno artist.
So this is Jeremy. My story is a little bit different, my career path. I went to college at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh. I went originally to study architecture. That's what I thought I wanted to do, even though I really should have been in the graphic design program. So after a year of doing that, I changed out of architecture and transferred into the design program, and I also got a minor in business because I kind of in the back of my head always wanted to and knew I would have to do my own thing, at least try it out, because I definitely have an entrepreneurial spirit. That's been part of my upbringing. So right after college, I decided I wanted to pursue design, but I also loved animation and film titles because in college I was exposed to some of the work of the great film title designers of the past, namely Saul Bass and the like. So there were only a few companies that actually were doing that type of work. Fortunately, one of them was in New York, where I was born and raised, and it was called RGA. And I got really lucky. As I was looking for work, I was going around to different design studios, and RGA had just put an ad in the New York Times Help Wanted section, Sunday paper. Again, back in the mid-'90s, there was no hot jobs or Monster.com. People actually looked in the newspaper for jobs. And
yep.
I had no idea that they put this ad in. So when I walked in the lobby, because the custom as a designer was you walk around town, you drop off your book, because your portfolio is a printed piece. It's not a DVD or a website.
Sure.
Again, I'm dating myself, but I had a book. And you had to drop it off at these different design studios and then hope that they look at it, and the next day you go pick it up, and, if there's interest, there's interest. So they had just put an ad in for a designer. So when I walked in the lobby of RGA, the receptionist said to me, did they call you? Did they they asked you to bring it in? I didn't know what she was talking about. I said, yeah, they called me. And basically I bypassed a stack of 8,000 resumes that came in from the New York Times, because the creative directors were only calling a small handful of resumes they liked, and I was able to get on a short list without even knowing it. I was at RGA literally a month out of college, and then I spent 5.5 years there, and I left in January of 2000, and spent about a year freelancing. But I also started working at a startup agency that was doing some .com work, again, the mid-2000s. That's where the place to be in New York, pre-IPO type of place.
Right.
So I was doing a little bit of that, although it was kind of vaporware, and the place went under very quickly in the tidal wave of companies going out of business. And I realized then pretty quickly that I needed to start my own thing, and I was in touch with Danny, like, are you ready to leave RGA? Are you ready? This is not working. And,
let's do this. Right.
Yeah, let's do this kind of thing, I was working in a startup, and there was just no work. It was like all proposals, and everybody around me was doing Napster all day and buddy chats. I wasn't into it. I really wanted to build stuff and make stuff move.
Yep.
So I started freelancing, and I was doing a little bit of work with ESPN through another production company. They kept hiring me to do their promos for ESPN Classic, and it kind of gave me some motivation that
you could kind of set up shop.
I don't need
work
for anybody.
Yeah.
There's a market for doing this stuff quick and cheap and getting things done.
Yeah. That's great. So when I started researching Perception, the first thing I noticed was obviously your resume. I mean, Avengers, Age of Ultron, Iron Man 2, RoboCop. I mean, these are major motion pictures. And then obviously on the B2B side, clients like IBM. So I want to talk a little bit about, what is your approach to sourcing these big time, client engagements? And you guys can feel free to get as technical as maybe you want to get if you do have like a methodical way, or keep it as light as you want. But a lot of companies are trying to go after big projects, big customers. You guys have obviously been successful at doing this. So any feedback you guys could offer in that respect would be great.
Well, we're both born and bred New Yorkers. I'm from Queens. Jeremy's from Brooklyn, so there's that no-quit attitude.
Yep.
I nicknamed Jeremy the Crowbar because he opens up doors that no one on this planet could probably open. And then I call myself the
charmer, the snake charmer.
I call myself the charmer. And once I get in the door, it's kind of like it's kind of the restaurant background. I take care of the clients the way they've never been taken care of. So between the two of us, people just become very hypnotized and mesmerized as to what we can offer and what we actually pull off with our team. Because they'll look at the work and they'll say, "Wow, this stuff is beautiful. Do you guys have a crew of 100 people?" And we're like, "No, there's just about 12 to 15 of us." And they just kind of sit there in awe, and whether that's Marvel executives or major directors like Favreau, or whether it's the head of design at IBM, they always seem to be astonished at the work we do for them.
At the very beginning, as the two of us were starting something from zero, from nothing, there was this never quit attitude. There's always a way. We'll figure it out. And we were able to accomplish things that even mystified us. And I think that is in our DNA. And I think it was also fostered a lot at RGA because there was a seriously intense work ethic there that everybody, either you had it or if you didn't, then you were pretty much shown the door. So, that was part of that was here from birth with Perception. So the two of us, have a very common and similar work ethic that, we will never quit, and we'll figure out how to do stuff. So as we evolved from television work and commercial work into movies and then later into technology, a lot of it was new territory, somewhat unfamiliar territory, but we always figured it out, and we always surrounded ourselves with the best and the brightest, and we're constantly evolving and figuring out new ways of solving challenging problems.
Sure. And do you guys typically lead forward with your portfolio kind of like in the old days, or is it really, hey, we're going to knock down doors, get in touch with the right people, develop those relationships?
It's definitely a combination of both. Right at the start, right as we were putting the first coat of paint on the wall, we brainstormed a dream client list, call it the Dream 100, and we started putting up all the brands and clients, whether it was agencies, networks, or just actual brands that we wanted to work for. And I can tell you, 14 years ago, the first name on that list was Marvel.
Wow.
And, pretty much the top 10 list followed after that. It was, the ESPNs and the HBOs, and I think Playboy Channel was in there too. And one by one, we actually we started crossing them off. Marvel didn't happen overnight. It was, I guess, let me do the math, probably 7 years of lobbing grenades and sending missiles to their offices.
That's definitely persistent.
When I say missiles, I mean like Hulk Pez dispensers and Hulk surfboards and vintage comic books from our collections, just whatever we could do to get their attention. But we finally made it happen. So there's definitely a combination of tactical targets that we think we can add tremendous value to, or brands we're in love with. And then there's, of course, a lot of word of mouth and clients who get to work with us, spread the love, and hopefully share us and pass us on to their colleagues and their friends at other brands and companies. So it's definitely a combination.
Great. And I guess just as a final point, I mean, you said it took 7 years to get Marvel. What were some of the growing pains that you guys experienced transitioning from maybe smaller client projects to, a big fish like Marvel? Was there really like a change in your process to deal with that size of client, or what was that kind of experience like when you started landing the whales? A
little bit unnerving. It was definitely stressful. I had a full head of hair when we started Perception. Now I'm almost bald. So I think one of the things you learn is that, you take certain things on, and with Marvel, you better make damn sure you can deliver, because if you don't, you will never work with them again. And that's why
3 strikes.
Yeah, that's why they're very, very loyal to us, is that they know that they could trust us with anything and any movie and any type of work for them, and we're going to deliver. So I think, again, there's always that stressful, those projects that are going to make Jeremy and myself sweat and our team sweat, but those are the ones we learn from the most. And I think it's like the heart of Perception. It's the intensity that keeps this place alive. And I think once that goes, this place, it will never go, because we won't let it. But that's kind of like the death of Perception if it ever did. So I think one of the transitions we had to learn getting, for example, Iron Man 2, we started with maybe about 10 shots in the movie, and it ballooned to over 130, something like that, 150 maybe?
Yeah, something like that.
I can't remember. It was a while ago. But, it's just, again, surrounding yourself with the right people, making sure you're getting everything done on time. But there's definitely a huge learning curve, the resolution, and we still learn on the films today. We learned a lot on Age of Ultron. Everything's now in stereo, so we have to deliver multiple passes. It's a whole each movie we do for them becomes a whole learning experience. So,
and we have an incredible core group here of artists, designers, thinkers, storytellers, but we ramp up very quickly in size in order to accommodate the bigger fish and the whales, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
So once we say yes to something, then we have to figure out how we're going to accomplish it, and it's usually just finding the right people and building that team to enhance the team we already have. And that's why we have a great production team that's able to resource accordingly.
That's great. So actually, one case study that really stood out to me was the Avengers Age of Ultron project. And the reason it stood out to me was, based on the description, it kind of sounded like, the studio didn't really define a specific project scope. It was like kind of left, up to you guys to really come up with all the ideas. And my question is, design by its nature is something that can kind of always be tweaked and improved. I'm sure you guys have a ton of perfectionists on your staff that, are always like, oh, well, what if we did this? What if we did this? So my question is, how are you guys able to find structure in the creative development process? Like, hitting your project milestones, making sure that, in sort of this, especially with Age of Ultron, this kind of open reign to do whatever you guys want to do. How do you guys kind of approach that?
Yeah, I mean, we control. Obviously, the production department is key. They're responsible for making sure we hit milestones in the schedule and deliveries and things like that. But again, it just goes back to having the right team and knowing where their responsibilities lie, and people are all accountable, and they know that if certain things don't go out at certain times, we all don't. One doesn't go down, we all go down. So.
Mm-hmm.
I think the main core that we have is really, really good at not only the creative but also the time management. And again, the production side keeps the creative side
on their toes.
In check and on their toes, and making sure that they're not over creating something. Because Jeremy and I have both fell into that trap. We're creatives at heart, but we're also businessmen. So once we see a project going into the red, there's going to be a problem. So I think that's another checkpoint as well, is that making sure that we stay on budget, on budget, because obviously we need to keep this place open. And if every project was in the red and we let our creatives run this business, we'd be out of business probably 12 times over. So
Right. And do you guys have any sort of actionable advice for companies that struggle to stay disciplined with project milestones? I mean, this is something that I've, noticed. Yeah, I used to work in management consulting. I mean, people are pretty bad at managing project milestones for whatever reason. I mean, it's very difficult to stay disciplined. Do you guys have sort of, any kind of advice you could leave to, to companies that, would maybe help them?
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot to say on that. I'm not going to give away all our secrets, but we have sort of a little bit of a boot camp that we do with our project managers at Perception. A lot of the things revolve around dictating schedules that might be a little bit different than the real schedule in order to build in buffers for the inevitable creative that's going to go right up until the final second that you tell them you have to have something by.
Yep.
So, we learned that the hard way many, and obviously everything we know now is because we did it wrong at the beginning. And after doing it wrong, you start to figure out, well, we got to do something else because, we keep butting up against the same problems. And when you tell somebody you have to send out a link by 5 o'clock and they're first saving the file at 5:02, then that's a big problem. So you start to back time things and you start to tell them, you know what, I need it at 4, and then actually I need it at 3, and I need it at 2, and then you get that 3-hour buffer because it's always going to go late, something's going to go wrong, a system's going to crash, a file's going to get lost, whatever the hell happens, it's going to fall back on your shoulders. So you got to make sure that you have safety nets built in all around you, and always leave yourself an out. So, we don't encourage people to lie or deceive, but we definitely encourage people to, especially on the production side, to make sure that they have an out, make sure that they've controlled their schedule so that if somebody doesn't deliver on time, they're not going to be up against the wall because it just happens too many times and we take the bullet for it. So that's one little secret that we use that I don't think is that, secretive, but has saved our life on more than one occasion. The same thing applies to clients too. We like to underpromise and overdeliver. So we might tell a client that, you'll have something Friday, but then we send it a little earlier, and then they get more impressed by that. So that always helps too. Or sometimes we might finish early, and then we'll just hold it in what we call the warming drawer. We'll keep it for a day or two before it even has to go out, just to build up a buffer or work ahead to the next milestone before they've even evaluated the first milestone.
Right. I think also there's something that we call the perception urgency that keeps this place ticking constantly, whether we're slow or whether we're extremely busy. There's that urgency that our team and that Jeremy and I have that we share with our creative department and production department, that it's like, all right, let's get this done now because there's a couple other things cooking, and if they come in, we're never going to be able to get this done, so let's get it done, and then we won't have to worry about stressing out. So there's always that constant, it's like driving, it's like owning a Ferrari but driving at 10 miles an hour. Why would you own a Ferrari if you can't drive it at, 100?
Right.
So we keep this place at 100 miles an hour, so we never have to, ramp down or ramp up for anything. Our creative juices are constantly flowing.
That's great. That'll be a great quote in there, actually.
Can I change that to a Mustang instead of a Ferrari?
If you want the Mustang, that's fine.
R? No? All right.
Yeah, that's fun. So I know we're running low on time here. So the final two questions are two questions that I've asked every executive we've interviewed so far. The first one is, what are you guys reading right now, and what are some of your all-time book recommendations?
I think one of the most influential books for me was the E-Myth. We have the E-Myth revisited. I think I have 3 different E-Myths. I don't remember what each title was, but
right.
I think we bought that one on CD 10 years ago, and we both listened to it. And then I got the really thick volume recently. I guess it's E-Myth Revisited or something like that. And that was eye-opening and life-changing in that it told us that we have to start working on the business, not in the business. And from the beginning, when the two of us were doing every single thing at this place, from producing to cleaning the toilets, we realized in order to grow and move forward, we're going to have to find people to actually start working here so we could step back. And I think one of the biggest decisions we both agreed on was hiring a manager. Again, I'm going back 7, 8 years now when we hired our first manager who could sort of run day-to-day operations and allow Danny and myself to focus more on the direction of the company, new business opportunities, meeting people, connecting with people outside the office, going to a lot more presentations, becoming a little bit more of a face of the company and a voice of the company, rather than the guy with the fire extinguisher just putting out fires all day.
Yep.
So I credit that book with opening my eyes to that. But there's been so many along the way that we keep going back to.
Great. And the final question is productivity tools. How do you guys manage your daily activities? What technologies are you using right now?
As far as like project management?
It just, your day-to-day stuff. I mean, what are the tools that you guys use to kind of stay organized, stay on top of, your sort of daily routines?
I mean, for me, I just write everything down and make a ton of lists. I'm on LinkedIn and our email probably, all day. Those are really the only tools I think we both use consistently. A lot of Twitter and social media, stuff like that. But for me, we both, our offices are wallpapered with gigantic Post-it paper, which is a list after list, stacks and stacks and stacks of that stuff.
Yeah, if you came in here, you'd think it was a mess. But it's a kind of like an homage to A Beautiful Mind. There's connections. It's like an FBI profile room. It's actually it's interesting when you start to connect the dots. But one of the things that the two of us do in our daily routines is actually one of the most important tools is the gym and throwing around some heavy weights, because if you don't get yourself in the right state, then the rest of the day is a waste of time.
Wow.
So we use that to get ourselves in the right state at about 5:30 in the morning.
I go earlier.
Well, you go at 4:30. I'm old, so I got to eat. I got to sleep and then eat.
Yeah, I get up at 3:30 every day, and I'm in the gym at 4.
Wow.
So if you get up before all the birds, then you're beating out pretty much everybody in the rest of the world as well. So, your competition's asleep while you're up already thinking about what you're going to do.
That's great.
You set yourself up for success for the rest of the day, and even if you get nothing else done, you feel like you've accomplished something important. So it just automatically puts you in the right state of mind, and you're ready to just take it all on. So I've been doing that for pretty much since the very beginning of Perception, even in college, and it kind of has stayed with me, and I don't really even think about it. I'm just kind of on autopilot. I just get up at 3:30 and I go.
Again, that goes in line with the urgency of Perception. There's that state that we come into work with, and then it trickles down to the rest of the team.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, it loops back into what you guys were talking about, just everything with your culture. I mean, kind of living it from the start of the day through, carrying into the workday and everything. So, well, guys, this was really great. I really appreciate the time.